all getting quiet, so let's get started 2 seconds early. Good morning. Great to have you. Glad that you're here. Please open up, if you will, to Luke chapter 23, our study of Jesus as man. We're starting today to the last of the two chapters of the Gospel according to Luke, and we're getting into the devastating death of our Lord. However, the good news is I'm kind of glad we don't have to discuss that just yet today, but it's not a beautiful scene either, unfortunately, that leads up to it. So we're in Luke 23. We'll be starting in verse 1 in just a little bit. However, before we get there, I want to pick up with some homework that a couple of weeks ago I had assigned to you. By the way, big thanks to Brad and then also to Jackson for filling in for me. Grateful for that, and I'm sure things went very well. But in Luke 22, just at the very end of it, we had discussed this fact, that the high priest was very upset. And I'm not sure if we read this passage or not. It doesn't really matter too much if we did. So keeping your spot where we are, Luke 22:23, turn back, if you will, to Matthew 26. And if you're able to mark two spots at once, you might do this because we'll return here also. But I want to point out something that takes place with the high priest. Matthew 26, starting in verse 65. Then, and it's at the conclusion of these events that we read in Luke 22, then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." And they spit in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" These guys are almost literally spitting mad by this point. I do want to state something concerning the actions also of the high priest. Turning to, and we won't need to return in this spot, but Leviticus, it's an L of the Old Testament. Leviticus chapter 21, we're going to note how significant this event of the high priest is. There was a law in place. Leviticus 21 verse 10, the priest who is chief among his brothers. What would you call him? The priest who is chief. High priest, good. Okay, just making that connection here. So the high priest, on whose head the anointing oil is poured, and who has been consecrated to wear the garments, shall not let the hair of his head hang loose, nor tear his clothes. We'll go back to Matthew's account in chapter 26 that we read. Matthew 26, where the high priest is so angry. Verse 65, then the high priest tore his robes, his clothes. He's so upset, he's disregarding the law of God. He's in clear violation of it, something that's never to take place. And he says, this guy is a blasphemer. He's deserving of death. Let's kill him. The religious leaders of God's people. What could possibly get anyone, including the rest of these people in the hierarchy, so angry that they would violate God's law and then want to kill somebody like Jesus? So it goes back to something that Jesus has stated. Stay in Matthew 26, hopefully, if you're still there. Immediately before this is what precipitates the reaction of the high priest. Verse 63. But Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Okay, why does this make these guys so angry, especially the high priest? Excellent. So what Justin has told us, that there seems to be a comparison, and more of a comparison than a contrast here, to God himself. A, 100% agree. B, something else here. Good boy. Good boy. Go ahead. Excellent. So Joe, they know about this from Jewish prophecy. The book of Daniel, very familiar with Daniel, and you might recall in the gospel accounts, it's been stated by Jesus. If you remember in Daniel, He kind of refers back to Daniel some. So their minds are kind of in that spot. And I'll go back just a little bit, Joe. Verse 9, to tie in what Justin stated right here. As I look, thrones, this is in, Daniel 7, if anyone didn't hear that, Daniel 7. Verse 9, as I look, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, the head of his hair like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and his wheels burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from him, and 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. I had to do that really quickly when I was reading that in my head, and I did my calculator. Yes, I got that one. That's 100 million, in case you're wondering. So, all right, the court sat in judgment, and the books were open. Anyway, you have the torture of the enemies, especially the beast, and then the beasts, plural. And then you get into the Ancient of Days. But then attention shifts to the Son of Man. So to go back to what Justin said, there's all this attention being given to the Ancient of Days, whose head is white like wool. Who do you think that would be? That's God the Father, right? And then you have someone called the Son of Man spoken right alongside him, and this dominion and power that's given to him, it's almost like he's just right neck and neck with that one, God himself. So he's claiming essentially to be God himself, Jesus, in fulfillment of the prophecy these people know very well of the Christ. They've been looking for it. He's going to take over a kingdom, and he's going to reign forever. That doesn't sound like your average Joe, does it? Their minds go back here, and when they say he's spoken blasphemy, they understand that it's like he's claiming to be God himself and the offspring of God. Tell us if you're the Son of God. Tell us if you are the Christ. And he says, I am the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7. And these people are almost, if not literally, spitting mad, violating the law of God, the high priest tearing his clothes, which he's forbidden ever to do, and they're ready to put this guy to death. Very good, Joe. Appreciate that. Yeah. Great, Joe. A servant is not above his master. Have you ever been asked a religious question and you respond to, that's what you've spoken, that's a great question, and then just quoted or pointed to Scripture for the answer and received a harsh reaction from that? It's almost like it'd be much lighter if you just said yes or no, or well, my opinion is, whatever it is. Isn't that strange that simply the quotation or an allusion to Scripture could produce such offense to a person? A servant is not above his master. Don't be surprised if when you're given a religious question, which is a tremendous question, you want to give an honest answer and help someone out, and you just point the person to what Scripture says about it, if in some cases people might not be happy with that answer, even though it's the truth and it's what needs to be heard. I agree with you, Joe. It's strange that in giving simply a scriptural answer, one, well, it's kind of cool how he does it, one, but then two, that they would be so upset about it. But, it's the way it is. Yeah, well said, Joe. Okay, so thank you for that and looking into, contemplating that. Sorry we didn't have time to finish that last week. I just thought that was fascinating. Wanted to tie that back in. So we're in chapter 23 today in the first verse. Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. I'll often ask this when we start a Bible class, who are the them? Okay, the Jewish people. Go back to chapter 22 of our book. I think we're good with Matthew for now. So Luke chapter 22, and if you'll look in verse 66, I believe we find who the people are. As soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council. Here's who we have listed here. The elders, so these are the older advisors and leaders somewhat. The chief priests, which we understand by now, which include the high priest. The scribes, those are the copiers of the law, and probably some teachers of the law also. And then the council would be what? The Sanhedrin? Yeah, good. The judges, the justices, right. It's the Sanhedrin, it's the Jewish Supreme Court, is what this is. So, I mean, this is a pretty big conglomeration of important people right here. We've identified, verse 1, then the whole multitude of them of whom the chief priests, the scribes, the elders, the Sanhedrin council, everyone who's in power, basically, among the Jews, led him to Pilate. Okay, so we know who Pilate is. He's not a Jew. Who's Pilate? He's the prefect, right? And he's a what nationality? He's a Roman. Okay, good. So he's a Roman governor. That's over a king. Definitely not Caesar. Okay, so you have Caesar, governors, kings, which is weird to us. We think king, that's like overall. It's not exactly the case. Emperors overall back then under the Roman system. They arose and they led him to Pilate. Verse 2, and they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ a king. Let's talk about this just a little bit. A few accusations that are made against Jesus. First, we found this fellow perverting or making a mess out of our nation, sowing discord. The Prince of Peace, who proclaims a message of joy and peace, and love, forgiveness, of doing good to others even when they don't do good to you. Is this an accurate accusation that's made against Jesus? Number one, is he causing problems in the nation? Well, okay, there are two ways of looking at this, right? You have, do not think that I came to bring peace, right? I came to bring a sword. How has he brought such a terrible sword? In proclaiming the goodness and the will of God. Who the Romans are, who the Jews want to be, even though they know they should be somebody different. Good. Okay, very good, very good, very good. That's accusation number 2. I think we're pretty much done with one anyway. Accusation number 2. Paul asked this question: did he ever protest paying taxes to the government? Turn back to chat. Oh, I'm sorry. Good. That's the temple tax. Yeah. I think they're probably a lot like we are today. There were 489 taxes that they paid. That was one of them right there. So, but yeah, we know that he paid that tax for sure, right? Turn back to chapter 20 of the Gospel according to the good doctor. Luke 20. Back in verse 19. The scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived that he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something he said, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor, that is Pilate, what they're doing right now. So they asked him, Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly, and show no partiality, buttering him up, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute or pay taxes to Caesar or not? But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, Show me a denarius, the Roman coin. Whose inscription and likeness does it have? They said, Caesar's. He said to them, Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render to God the things that are God's. And they were not able, in the presence of the people, which is what they want to do for witnesses, to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. It's true that he's taught about Caesar and paying taxes. What did he teach about that? Bam. Oh, and everybody heard and saw it. So, accusation number 2 against Jesus, accurate or false? 100% false. They're just lying about him. Thirdly, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Do you remember Jesus ever just standing up and making this announcement? And understood in particular, and making this complaint to someone who's a ruler in the Roman Empire, it's almost like that he himself is a king, that he's trying to set up a kingdom to overthrow the Roman government. That's really what they mean by this? Bless you. Is that true? It's not true, but it's the accusation that's being made. Okay, keep your spot right here. Turn back to John, or forward I should say, to John 6. It's not too far from where we are if you have pages. John 6, verses 14 and 15. This is after the feeding of the 5,000. People like free food. They see a politician in the making. Verse 14, John 6. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him a king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. They want a physical kingdom with an earthly ruler that will be set up with such power as he's showing in these signs so that he can supersede the Roman government. And Jesus recognizes, hey, they're going to try through coercion to make me this kind of person, so what does he do? He gets out of Dodge. Why would he do that? As he will later tell Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, I were a threat to you, my servants would be fighting so that I wouldn't be delivered to the Jews. But that alone ought to tell you that my kingdom's not from here. And Pilate concludes from that, well, he's no threat to anybody and to the Roman government. Accusation number 3, he has made himself a king, trying to put himself in charge of a physical kingdom, understood, to overthrow the Roman government. Accusation 3, true or false? All of these false accusations, isn't this strange, that are being made against this innocent man? I know our fingers are getting some exercise here, but look at Mark's account in chapter 14. We shouldn't be surprised by all these false accusations. Mark 14, starting in verse 55. Listen to the goodness of these people's hearts. The religious leaders, don't forget, the cream of the crop. Now the chief priests and the whole council, the Sanhedrin council, as justices, your standards should be high and only seeking truth. But these justices of the council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. They're not openly and objectively looking at evidence. They're trying their best to create evidence. They're trying to, having already made their minds up, just to find something that will bolster their argument so that they can kind of twist it to make it look true. Listen to this, verse 56 of Mark 14. For many bore false witness against him. Problem was, their testimony did not agree. God had a rule set up, and we tend to follow that rule in American justice also. 2 or 3 witnesses, one person's word against another person's word is not going to stand up. Pretty easy to do that. Why is it when you have 2 people whose stories are contradicting that you shouldn't trust either one of them, or you can't trust the overall allegation? Something is always the case with truth. Eventually, truth finds its way to the light. And that's why it's important to dig and not just to take one person's word. You ever thought about why in the Bible do you have so many people that just keep talking about a lot of the same things? Why would you just have one person just tell us what we need to know? There seems to be more to it. God said, American justice, we understand the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, that carries some weight, holds some validity. What about when you have the eyewitness testimony of hundreds and then thousands of people? That's when you know, well, it has to be that way. That many people can't. It's not physically possible to make up that many stories, but all of them coincide perfectly with one another. It doesn't work that way. The truth eventually makes its way to the light. Many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands. Okay, time out. Did Jesus say this? Or at least something along these lines? Yeah, but they're misapplying it. They're twisting what Jesus said in the technicality of the wording and applying it to something that he didn't say. He was never talking about the edifice of God's worshipful house, but he was talking about, of course, his body. Verse 59, yet even about this their testimony did not agree. The truth always finds its way out, and that's why it's important for us to dig. I'm sure you follow the same principle. I do my best. I don't care who it is, if it's my own flesh and blood. When someone tells me something, I'm completely open-minded to it. But when it involves another person, even if it's my own on the other side. I want to hear the other side because I don't want to make up my mind just yet. I feel like it's only right and fair to get the full picture of all the evidence there is before I make up my mind about something and determine a course of action. So that's what's taking place here. All these witnesses, you heard Jesus say something bad? Well, come up here and talk about it. Bless your heart. How awful your ears had to listen to such a thing. Oh, and you too about the same. Well, come up here. Oh, you didn't hear the same thing. Okay, well, how about you back? And they just go through one after another, and they can't find testimony that agrees. But my question is this: if you're the highest court of the land, if you are recognized as honorable justices, and these accusations are being brought against a guy that he should die, and the allegations aren't the same from here to here to here to here, what should you do? In the words of Johnny Cochran, wasn't it? If the glove don't fit. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that glove might have fit a little too well. Now, that's just me, okay? You might think differently about that. Yeah, they should acquit him of the charges. So let's go back to our text of Luke 23. The accusations, threefold they make, Luke records. We found him perverting, causing trouble in the nation, false. Forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, false. He actually commanded for such to be done. Saying that he himself is Christ, a king, as in he has a physical kingdom, and he's going to overthrow the Roman government, understood. But really even going around just proclaiming himself openly as the Christ and the king doesn't happen a whole lot, if any, really. A lot of times it's people who will be making observations about him, and when put on the spot, it's, well, you've said something pretty interesting there, haven't you? A lot of times that type of response. Verse 3 of our passage, Luke 23. Then Pilate asked him, saying, so come on, just tell me right now, are you the king of the Jews? He answered him and said, it is as you say. And your translation, I don't know if it's like mine in the New King James, but it is as, that's in italics because it's added by the translators. And literally what it reads here is, you say, or you say that I'm a king. What exactly does he mean by that? I don't think the translators are off base in the idea that they have. I don't know if I would translate it quite the way they have. I like a little more strictness personally in translation. That's me. Look at Mark's account in chapter 14. We were just there a moment ago. Mark 14, and in fairness, I do want to state this isn't the exact moment. This is just a little bit before. But I do believe it captures the sentiment of what Jesus means by these expressions a little more explicitly put here. Verses 61 and 62 of Mark 14. But he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. So that's not sidestepping it at all, but at this point he just gives a straight out answer. And I believe that's what he means by the others when he says, you say. I think he's saying that what you've said is true, is what he means by that. So I just want to point out that he's not skirting this. He openly admits who he really is in this sense, even though he does very little speaking. And this is the point at which he says, I am, and here's the evidence of that. You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Remember that? I'm the fulfillment of the messianic prophecy of Daniel, the 7th chapter. The Ancient of Days, I'm lifted up alongside him. I'm deity. I am the Son of God. I'm going to be put in charge of a kingdom. I will reign as king over it, and my kingdom will never end, is what he's admitting right here. And of course, that's what makes the high priest so angry. He answers the same, essentially, I think the meaning of it, the same way before Pilate. Luke 23, verse 4, so Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no fault in this man. And again, we have more information about all this in John's account where he tells them, it's true that I'm a king and over a kingdom, but I'm no threat to your kingdom. It's not about here. It's about another existence. So you don't have to worry about me. And that's why Pilate understands he's not going to hurt anybody, and he's no threat to the Roman government. But, verse 5, they were the more fierce, saying, he stirs up the people. teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. Is it true that he teaches all throughout the land of the Jews? Yes. Is he stirring up the people, as in inciting them to like violence and rebellion against the Roman government? No. And that's what's meant by this. So that's the accusation that keeps being thrown in front of Pilate. You better look out. And by the way, Pilate knows about rebellions. He's had at least one good one on his watch, not a couple by this point. And he probably knows that he's one good rebellion away from losing his power and probably his life. And I think that's partly why he's so concerned in this. And he wants to I know Luke's account doesn't record this. Matthew does. Why does he want to let this guy go? I mean, he really doesn't care anything about justice. He's a mess. Pilate is. But why would he have such a conscience at work with this man? Yeah. Well, why might it bring trouble to kill a guy like Jesus? I mean, he's a nobody. Okay. He's had a huge following up to this point. And Pilate knows that. Okay? So you kill the guy that the Jews love, and you've had some real problems with the Jews, and you might have another big problem on your hands, number one. Number two, Pilate might be the head of the body. Who's the neck who's probably helping to turn this head? His wife. Why does she matter here? We're not told if this was divinely given. However, I have a suspicion, do you, that it probably was. I think probably God has warned her through her dreams that you don't want to mess with this guy. Don't cross him and the power that's behind him. She, as the neck that's connected to the head, has passed that on to the head and said, hey, use this to influence your decision. And actually, she says, I'm telling you right now, you better not do anything. And don't you come home if, well, I don't know if she said that, but it kind of sounds like it's the tone. And I think in large part because of that, he's trying to keep the peace at home also. Tony? Good. And you can say what you want about the Romans and their religion. They're a pretty religious people, the Romans. I know they don't live like it. They have a different religion, though, than what we do, different moral standards. They have all these gods and goddesses. And, of course, with the Grecians in Athens in Acts 17, they even have the altar made to the unknown God. They're afraid they might leave one out and offend one. So what if there is something to this story about the God of the Jews and he has this ridiculous power and this is his own child and I make the wrong decision with him? So he's looking at, hey, maybe it's the powers of heaven then might be working against me. So, I mean, there is some religion on their part. He bears witness, as Tony stated, the same testimony essentially that his wife gave, just a little more specific. Verse 6, when Pilate heard of Galilee, they mentioned from Judea to Galilee, he's teaching all. Wait, what did you just say? Galilee? Is this guy from Galilee? And as soon as he found out that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, Herod over Galilee, he gladly sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem, though, same city at that time. So Pilate's a pretty good politician. He says, technically what? He's not from this place, even though he's done things down here. Well, let's send him back up to Galilee, only he doesn't have to go there because Herod's already in town. This is going to work out great. So he thinks, hey, I can get this guy off my hands. I won't be guilty for anything, and I'm done with this. I don't want to mess with it one way or another. If it goes south, I'm not the authority behind it, and Caesar's not going to be mad at me. Verse 8, now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about Jesus, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. I think we probably know enough about Herod to already conclude properly concerning his character. This is Herod Antipas. What did Herod Antipas recently do? Not good. Yeah. He thought his brother's wife was quite attractive, so he just went ahead and took her for himself. And there's this guy he's a mess. He's always instigating trouble. His name's John the Baptist. And they run into each other, and John says, you know what you've done with your brother's wife? Not exactly what you should have done, and you really need to fix this situation. He's furious. He wants to kill the guy, but the Jews love him, so he can't do that. So he just throws him in prison, locks the door, and he tosses away the key for a while. And then his stepdaughter comes and dances very seductively before him because he thinks she's really pretty too. I mean, this guy, he's nasty, okay? And so he says, man, hey, I'll give you anything you want. And so she goes and asks Mom, hey, we did really well, Mom. What do you want now? And so she says, I want John the Baptist's head on a platter. And so it's told, and before the guests of the king, what can he do now? He's already given his word. So he sends and he has John the Baptist decapitated in prison. So just to give an idea, this is the kind of guy right here that we're dealing with. Jesus shows up. Jesus, yay, have been wanting to talk to you. I've heard of hey, show me a miracle. This is just sheer entertainment for this man. You remember what Jesus tells the Jews? What kind of people seeks after a miracle? Foolish and evil and adulterous, impure. Well, that fits Herod to a T, generation. But he's hoping he can see a miracle as he comes before him. I'm going to guess that Jesus didn't show him any miracle. Then he questioned him with many words. But he wasn't even fun to be around because he didn't talk. He didn't answer him anything. Why doesn't Jesus speak anything when his life is on the line? 2 reasons. Okay, it's a catch-22. He doesn't care about justice no more than Pilate does. It's pretty sad when someone as evil and corrupt as Pilate seems to have 10 times the character probably as this guy, Herod, supposed to be a servant of the Lord. Not either is great, but I think he shows a little more conviction than the other. But he answered him nothing. Oh, I'm sorry, Roy. Isaiah 53, 7 and 8. As the lamb led to the slaughter, so he opened not his mouth. As the lamb before his shears is dumb or speechless. It was a fulfillment of prophecy. Number 1, that's why he did so. Number 2, why didn't you think he wouldn't just open his mouth and speak? Here lately especially, the chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the council, all these people are conspiring together to try to catch Jesus in his words and asking him these challenging biblical questions, and he just makes them look dumb. And it's mentioned time and again leading up to this. They were shocked or astonished at his words. No one could answer him anything. From that time forward, no one dared ask him anything. 1 Corinthians 2, 7 and 8 says about the hidden wisdom of God, none of the rulers of this age knew it. For had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. I'm not going to try to bind this belief on you. I will that he's the fulfillment of prophecy, not speaking. We know that's the case, one reason why. I believe the second reason why is that he could likely use such irresistible logic that he might be able to get out of this if he wanted to. He knows he's not meant to get out of it. And personally, I believe, in part, he keeps his mouth closed because his being pronounced guilty is what's necessary for our being pronounced innocent. And our innocent verdict matters so much more to him than his guilty verdict. We understand he's not guilty. That doesn't mean that, but what people would say about him. All right, let's continue on. Luke 23. In verse 10, the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Then Herod with his men of war treated him with contempt and mocked him and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe. We'll have that in our sermon in a little bit. And sent him back to Pilate. That day, that very day, Pilate and Herod became good friends with each other. For previously, they had been at enmity with each other. Any guesses as to why they haven't been so friendly in the past, Herod and Pilate? They're both evil, both love power, and abuse of women and probably everything else imaginable. How can 2 guys like that not get along?
First of all, they both recognize that their authority comes from 2 different places.
Oh, okay. 2 different worldviews. That can be tough sometimes.
So there's not anything about their perspectives that would.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, Paul. Back in Luke 13, the first 2 verses, we often read this passage for verses 3 and 5. I tell you, unless you repent, you all likewise perish. But look at verses 1 and 2 here of Luke 13, if you want to follow along. There were some present at that very time who told him about the Galileans. Remember where the jurisdiction of Herod is. That's up north, a couple provinces, Judea, Samaria, Galilee. Herod's over this spot up here in Galilee, and the prefect here, the governor, is mainly over this region of Judea to the south, but he has more power than the king and in the area. There were some present at that very time who told him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled or mixed with their sacrifices. In other words, these people of Galilee had traveled down south to where worship is done, where? Jerusalem, okay, in the temple. And here they are being good Jewish citizens making sacrifices to their God. And what's Pilate do? As the sacrificial lambs' throats were slit, perhaps that's the mode of death. In some way, he spills their blood, maybe in the very way their sacrifices were given, and their blood spills on and pollutes the altar of God. And he answered them, do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered in this way? Now, if you're an inferior power up to the north and your people have gone down south to worship their God, perhaps in innocence, this guy, he's a mess, Pilate. And Pilate, just in a nasty way, has these guys executed on or right beside the altar of God so that their blood splashes on, or maybe on top of it so that it just spills all out on it. How do you think that's going to make the people view you in Galilee? This hurts. This hurts the reputation of Herod. I think both these guys are as selfish can be. And it may be that he's just sincerely upset about the religious side of things. Hopefully that's what it is. Does it make sense they've been upset with each other for a while? But hey, the fences have been mended by this point because they're working together in tandem to get rid of this guy. Pilate doesn't really want to. But now he's seeing another motivation, I think, for executing Jesus. Well, this guy's treating me pretty well, and hey, this could build my rapport among the Jews. I think Satan's at work here. Verse 13 of Luke 23, then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, said to them, you have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, I've done what I'm supposed to do in my role. I've examined him in your presence. I find no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. In other words, these are false accusations that have been brought. No, neither did Herod. For I sent him back to him, and indeed nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I don't think Herod really cares so much personally. That's my opinion. But why might he be a little gun-shy to kill someone who's recognized as a pretty sharp prophet of God's people? First of all, if they recognize him as that. But secondly, there's some history here. What has Herod recently done? He had executed a very popular prophet of God's people. And if he just keeps killing off all these religious stars, he could be in trouble himself. Pilate says, look, we agree with this. We don't see any reason to hurt him. I will therefore chastise or punish him and release him. For it was necessary for him to release one to them at the feast. What sense does that make? It's necessary at a time of celebration of God's people to let loose a criminal. Well, who would want that? There are a lot of people being arrested at this time because they're standing up to the Roman government. How do you think the Jewish people view those who are standing up to the Roman government and are imprisoned because of it? They see them as patriots, okay, as these patriotic heroes, Justin. And so he's releasing one person. I think they probably commonly choose someone who stood up to the Roman government, not so much someone who's just been a menace to society. And this is just a custom that's been in place for a while. Verse 18, and they cried out all at once, saying, away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city, and for murder, which sounds terrible to us. I'm going to guess this is a guy probably viewed as a patriot who stood up to the Roman government. I think the rebellion that he's led, the stealing of which he's been a part, and the murder in which he's been involved is probably, now again, this is me, but standing up to the Roman government, which rebellion would seem to be that way. Probably so. Verse 20, Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus, again called out to them. But they shouted, "No, we don't want this guy. Crucify him, crucify him." Then he said to them the third time. You recall lots of threes in these final hours of Jesus' life. Then he said to them a third time, "Why? What evil has he done? I found no reason for death in him. I will therefore punish him and let him go." But they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of those men and of the chief priests prevailed. So Pilate acquiesces and gives sentence that it should be as they requested. I do want to turn over one final time to Matthew, this time chapter 27. Matthew 27, we'll read verse 24 as we bring things together. Why does Pilate give in? He knows the guy is innocent. He should want to keep peace at home, and his wife's already told him, as the neck, what the head needs to be doing. There's the potential of a problem if he executes this guy. I think this is the greatest motivation for Pilate right here. Matthew 27, 24. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing by insisting on the release of Jesus, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I'm innocent of this man's blood, just a righteous blood you may have. See to it yourselves." What's really the final straw for Pilate? Why does he hand Jesus over? People ask for it. Good. And if he doesn't do it, what seems to be building? A rebellion, a riot. He's already been through this at least once, not a couple of times. If a riot takes place because he stands up for this innocent man, Pilate is very likely going to lose his power, and it would not be surprising in the least if he lost his life. So I think he's looking at this, looking out for number one, very selfishly. What's in my best interests is what he sees right here. So as Jesus stands before him, this is the decision that Pilate makes. I would like to end with our memory verse, 23:25. Roy, please, have the honors. You have your choice. If you look at the rap sheet of Barabbas, and we know from all the gospel accounts put together, a robber, a rioter, and a murderer. Can you think of anyone worse in society that you'd want out just running around? They picked the worst of the worst so they could execute the best of the best. What a trade they requested. I want to close with this thought. When you read this, it appears what we have here is Jesus standing in Pilate, before Pilate's judgment seat, with Pilate making a decision as to what he's going to do with the life of Jesus. Is that true? Yeah, in a sense. But Jesus says this in John's account, "You do realize, sir, that you could have no power at all against me unless it were granted you from above." And what he's insinuating is, you do understand that really I'm the one that's in control here, not you. So you tell me, what decision are you going to make? So that when Jesus is standing before Pilate at his judgment seat, it's really not Pilate who's making a decision about Jesus' life. What you really have here is Pilate standing before Jesus' judgment seat, and the decision that he's making about Jesus is the decision that Jesus is going to be making about his own, Pilate's life. And you also realize that every one of us is Pilate. And we might think here, I got all this power, I can choose to do whatever I want, and in particular with Jesus, we're not having Jesus standing before us, and we're making a decision about Jesus' life, even though it might seem like it. Really, it is we who are standing before Jesus in his judgment seat, and the decision that we make with Jesus is the decision that we're putting in place for Jesus to make about us when we stand before his judgment seat. As Christ stood before Pilate in his judgment seat, we are standing before Jesus in his judgment seat, and we have the same decision to make. What will we do with our Lord? All right, that takes us through verse 23, about halfway through the chapter. If you don't mind, please read the remainder of this if you haven't already, and do refresh. I do want to tell you, though, it'll be a couple of weeks before we're back in Luke class. We have SYC, excited about that next week. We have Mr. Ron Brown, correct? Coming 31 August, I think. Okay, so that's going to be the week after that, just for Bible class. So it'll be a few weeks. But please do read the remainder of Luke 23. Let's memorize one of my favorites, 43 of Luke 23, when we actually get into the death itself. Very gruesome of Jesus. Okay, any comments before we dismiss for a short break? Okay, thanks.